38 Escape. Missile status changed from RDY to lock on. The Major temporarily changed the number of launches to 1, because he realized that the current situation was too difficult to fire all the missiles. The moment he pressed the launch button, he was surprised to find that a white light flashed under the opponent's wing, and he was within such a small azimuth that he could fight back. Everything seems unreasonable and fair, but the two R-73 missiles launched by the Su-30 still drew a large circle in the air and flew towards the Major. How could these Russian weapons do such an attack? The Major regretted that he only fired one missile, and it seemed that he was at a considerable disadvantage in addition to the offensive and defensive transposition. The situation is taking a turn for the worse. Due to the distrust of the United States in the late anti-terrorist war, Pakistan has never obtained the AIM-9X missile, and the AIM-9M missile can only be tied with the R-73 in fighting ability, and is at a disadvantage in the large off-axis launch ability. When Hassan pressed the button, the other party haven't entered the Rattlesnake's no-escape zone yet. The Su-30's powerful turning ability played a role. It turned sharply when it was close to Mach 1, which caused the sidewinder it launched to lose its target in a tracer. Rashid's direction was still unclear, and Hassan had only one fighting bomb left. He decided to abandon the Su-30 and immediately support Rashid's plane. Of course, the premise is that he can quickly get rid of the two R-73 missiles flying in a huge arc. If he can retreat completely in today's battle, he will be satisfied. Colonel Sami is sitting in the underground command room. There is no battle situation provided by the data link on the display, but from the pilot's brief dialogue on the radio, he already knows very well that the remaining two aircraft of the 5th Squadron are in trouble today. Air combat in textbooks often refers to one-on-one. If there are a large number of enemy planes in the battlefield, there will always be one that will bite its rear in the chaotic air confrontation. The colonel leaned forward and had an urge to take over the command, but in the current situation, he couldn't make any move, unless the early warning aircraft arrived at a suitable position, but by that time, the air battle should have ended. I saw a third bandit. He was far above. The wingman reported as he dived, hoping to hide in the mountains. With skill and luck, Rashid has already avoided a round of medium-range bombs. A minute ago, he accelerated head-on towards the Indian aircraft, making him jump out of the flight envelope of the opponent's missiles before they could attack and maneuver. This move worked, but then, he saw the third enemy plane with the naked eye. These were not the two planes detected by the radar. The Su-30 was deliberately dislodged behind the other two planes and seemed to control the overall situation. In any case, the Indian commander of this squad is more powerful than he and Hassan have ever seen before. His formation is scattered and disordered, but the high and low coordination complement each other, like a giant net. In the Indian formation, only one aircraft's radar was turned on. The enemy did this, obviously to make the opponent ignore the number, but it was too late to find out. "Don't underestimate the enemy's head-on ability," shouted an old man's voice on the radio. Rashid, who was not familiar with Sami, did not know who was shouting. The F-16's engine roared and rushed towards the two black spots in front. Head-on impact is a tactic of winning at risk, which can increase the speed of the aircraft's movement on the opponent's cockpit canopy. Disrupting some of the opponent's aiming actions, if the opponent fires a weapon, it is easier to dodge. The reality is that even if the opponent's infrared-guided missile can turn at 30 G, it is still much harder to hit an approaching aircraft at high speed than it is to hit a high-speed fleeing aircraft. Occupy the position of the sun, don't let the communication was suddenly interrupted, which is often the case in the mountains, so Rashid didn't know until his death, what the old man on the radio wanted to say. The pilot did not occupy the direction of the sun, as the colonel had instructed, and in his opinion, the enemy had 3 planes, which was impossible. He fired a missile when the missile lock sign didn't light up in order to get out of the way for the enemy plane ahead, which he did. One turned at 30 to one side, and Rashid's F-16 headed the other turning sideways, he was delighted to find that on the 2's electronic tactical threat display, the radar tracking disappeared. Now is the time to run away. All of this is under the observation of the Su-30 at the top. Captain Goya's eyes have never left the enemy plane that is approaching and wants to break through from below. He hopes that this will be his own record today, and also the team's second record. Goya has clearly identified the enemy aircraft. These are the single-seat F-16C fighters of the 5th Squadron of the Indian Air Force, not the old-fashioned F-16A of the 9th Squadron, or the two-seat fighters of the 11th Squadron, the B-shape, which is a genuine Burke 52, of which there are only 8 in the whole of Pakistan, and 6 more two-seaters. In the state of war, the United States has frozen the delivery of the second batch of 14 aircraft, which means that by the end of the war, Pakistan will not have more F-16C-shaped fighters. Eagle 2, stop it and let me come. The second wingman quickly approached the turning F-16. Now Goya can choose a variety of weapons, but the awkward distance makes the enemy plane on the edge of the attack envelope of the two missiles at the same time. Of course, he can't deliberately drag the distance to launch the R-77, so he has to get closer. His height advantage allows him to gain faster speed than Rashid's F-16, and he can completely bite the opponent, as long as the wingman interferes with the opponent a little. F-16C found that the second Su-30 did not take advantage of its vector nozzle to force the nose to point itself, but traveled far to outflank it. It can be seen that the purpose of these Indians is to surpass the end of the chase, which is the middle of the envelope of the R-73. Launch missile. Rashid didn't choose to deal with it. His F-16C was saddled with huge conformal fuel tanks, which made his turns not as good as those old F-16s, and he could only pull the plane up because he was still confident in speed, about 1 Mach, advantage in exchange for climb speed. He hoped that the bulky bandit would be easier to throw off in the vertical plane. So he completely fell into Goya's trap. This 1-on-3 contest could never have a chance of winning, but Goya's deployment was more complete. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, Goya's Su-30 was ready for battle. The flexible F-16 was always dangling below him at 2 o'clock, but the fatigue was already present, and the vertical climb consumed a lot of the speed of the aircraft. Although Goya couldn't use the HUD to cover it, it didn't matter. Goya's helmet sight had already been locked, and the firing sound had been ringing in his ears, but the new squad leader didn't want to fire the weapon like this. The enemy plane is struggling to get rid of it, like a frightened bird. If he continues to escape at a high angle of attack, he will eventually become an excellent target for complete loss of speed. So Goya's plane also did not use the vector nozzle to force the F-16. He knew that this action had a price. All he had to do was a general chase, forcing the enemy plane to circle with him. The captain did not expect to drive the enemy into his own. At 12 o'clock, it was the F-16C, an aircraft known for its agility, and all he had to do was wait until the enemy's speed dropped below 600 kilometers. Almost done now. 2 R-73s flew away from the pylon one after another. This missile can be launched at a large off-axis angle. However, if the enemy is too fast or too close, they may eventually escape the theoretical missile flight envelope. Goya has such a lesson. He is a person who will not make a second mistake. As Captain Goya had expected, the F-16C did not make any effective evasion, not even throwing off the canopy to parachute, and the missile hit it. Sami was sitting in the basement of the base, and Rashid's rapid breathing suddenly stopped, and the radio was no longer found.